Right, so if you've seen Kinds of Kindness, you are probably seen there going, what on earth did I just watch? On top of that, if you've seen the marketing, if you've heard about it, if you don't have the stomach for it, you are also probably seen there going, what on earth is this movie? So today I want to tell you all about Kinds of Kindness. I really want this video to serve as a great post-game discussion for those of you who have seen the movie. So we're going to get into each short film in Kinds of Kindness in depth. I'm going to talk about theories. I'm going to talk about what I liked, maybe what I didn't like, and what I thought of the film overall as an anthology film. Now, for those of you who can't handle the movie or don't want to watch the movie but want to watch this video, I will do enough to probably help you keep up as we go along, but I really do think if you don't watch the movie, you are missing out on a lot of detail that I'm just not going to have time to go over and cover. So I'm going to do some quick general overall spoiler-free thoughts, and then I'm going to go into each film in depth, talk about theories, talk about really interesting things that I pulled from these short films. So first off, in general, spoiler-free, I thought this was a genuinely fantastic movie all in all. I have not seen something like this ever. It was really fascinating. I haven't seen an anthology film in theaters. That was really exciting. And I love the approach that Yorgos took, getting the same actors to play different characters each time. I've heard a lot of complaints that it feels like a reset every single time a new film starts, but I actually disagree. I found it made the 2 hour and 47 runtime just absolutely fly by. I thought the performances were good, and thankfully, this movie is properly freaky, properly dark, and properly disturbing. Each section has something that makes you go, holy shit. I was lucky enough to see this at an early screening, and the crowd I saw it with was absolutely eating it up. So this was really great for me. Now, Jesse Plemons famously won Best Actor over at Cannes for his performance in Kinds of Kindness, and I totally see why. However, I do think people are hyping up Jesse Plemons a huge amount and kind of underplaying how good Emma Stone is, especially in the last two sections. I think the last section in particular actually demands a lot from Emma Stone. She is playing with a bunch of subtle emotions that she really has to communicate through this skittish sort of body language. I will get into more of that in spoiler talk, however. Apparently, initially, this movie was meant to be cutting between the three stories. So instead of going story 1, story 2, story 3, it was meant to actually be bouncing from scene to scene to scene, and they all climax at the same time, and they all kind of dissipate at the same time. And hot take, I actually would have loved to see this version. Now, yes, it's a very ambitious idea to have 3 stories running concurrently that also have the same actors and actresses playing different roles. But I think if they pulled this off, and given the 3 movies, I think they could have, it would have been incredibly fascinating to see. Now, the first story is the longest, and it's called The Death of RMF. And basically it follows an abusive, toxic boss-worker relationship where basically the entire worker's job, played by Jesse Plemons, is to basically fulfill whatever the boss wants him to do. So this comes down to everything he eats, what time he has sex, whether him and his wife can have a baby or not. And basically the boss just wants the worker to live this perfect existence and do whatever he wants. And the plot for that story really gets moving when the boss, played by Willem Dafoe, asks the worker, played by Jesse Plemons, to kill a man. The next story is called RMF is Flying. The plot of this is a man's wife has been missing on a deserted island. She's been missing for such a long time that the husband, played by Jesse Plemons, basically decides, yep, my wife is missing, she's gone. And the moment he basically gives up hope, she's back. However, while she's back, a few things are different. He notices a few things are off, and he starts to wonder, is this really my wife, or is this a changeling? Is this a doppelganger? And it's basically a commentary on paranoia, the things we do to each other, for each other, and whether you really ever know someone. It's incredibly fascinating, and it's one of my favorites in this film. And it has a lot of my favorite moments from this film overall. The next and final story in this anthology is RMF Eats a Sandwich. Spoiler free, the story follows members of a cult played by Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons who are in this controlling sex cult that is obsessed with contamination, purity, and water. And in my opinion, giving any more away than that is spoiler territory. I think you should go into pretty much all 3 of these stories knowing as little as possible. So yeah, my final spoiler free thoughts is, yes, the title is Kinds of Kindness, but this is a cruel, dark, bleak movie at different points. And the beauty and the substance and the gorgeous moments are really things you have to search for and pull for. And some of the gorgeous moments and commentary on love and desire are only there if you pull certain interpretations from the movie. If you go with the dark interpretations of each story, this movie is just really exploring the depths of human cruelty and the way people abuse each other and take advantage of one another's love for each other. For example, while the first story, the one about the abusive boss and the worker, can be seen as an allegory for capitalism, it can be seen for an allegory of abuse of power. Talking about the depths some people go to keep the money flowing, how much you give of yourself to your work. I think it's also a really disturbing, dark look at devotion and trauma bonding, which is something I think is present in all three films. Similarly, in RMF is Flying, I think that story is looking at what you will do for the ones you love, how well you really know your partner, what constitutes abuse and what constitutes love, and I think it's a really fascinating, interesting look at those subjects. And finally, the last section, there is clearly stuff to pull about a criticism of faith, a criticism of purity culture especially. I think that's going over a lot of people's heads, but I think the obsession of purity and water and being contaminated and the fact that it's a sex cult really does lean into a criticism of purity culture and born-again virgins and stuff we see in Christianity. But I still think a lot of the emotional core of this third movie and of all three movies is love, is devotion, and how far you can push love and devotion to your craft and the people around you, and the line where love and devotion and kindness becomes cruelty and abuse and manipulation. All three sections are featuring characters that are just hurtling, propelling themselves forward to an inevitable, horrifying, and traumatic conclusion. And yeah, very unsubtly, the trailers for this movie heavily featured the song Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics, where a core line in that song is some of them want to abuse you, some of them want to be abused by you. Like, that is the core of this movie. I think the movie is really trying to get at what constitutes manipulation and cruelty and abuse and what actually constitutes love and a misguided, caring gesture. All right, so I'm so excited to spoiler talk this movie. Now, I didn't even mention my ranking in the spoiler-free section, and the reason for that is I think going into an anthology film, you don't want to know what people think is the best one because I think that will flavor your experience. I heard going into Kinds of Kindness that the first one is by far the best and the other two kind of suck. And I feel like I'm living in a different world. I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone. To me, the second and the third one are pretty much tied. I think they are both astounding and excellent. And I think the first one is pretty great. I think the first one is really well done and pretty great, but it had the least emotional pull, least emotional connection for me. In terms of what I'm left unpacking and thinking about and really wanting to like interpret and theorize about, the first one I have the least attachment to. I will say there were certain cinema goers that were particularly annoying in the first section of the film that might have flavored my experience. On top of that, the sound was a bit shitty at my theater and my ears were still adjusting for quite some time, so that might have thrown me off. I thought the first one, if I had to choose a weakest one, it was that one. And I feel like I'm living in La La Land. Like, every single review I see is basically people unanimously going, yeah, the first one is easily the best. And I feel like I'm going nuts. I feel like the first one is the most simple. I think it's the most straightforward. And maybe that's why it's everyone's favorite. But for me, the second and the third one, I just have so much to think about and unpack. So first off, the things I can't stop thinking about and theorizing about, it's the fact that what Willem Dafoe's character is doing to Jesse Plemons' character is doing to his wife, Hong Chow. We are meant to see Raymond, the boss, Willem Dafoe's character, as the villain here, this master manipulator that's controlling Jesse Plemons. However, very subtly, the movie basically shows us at the start that Jesse Plemons is bleeding this down through to his wife, Hong Chow. We find out that not only is Jesse Plemons being manipulated, but Jesse Plemons is helping manipulate his wife. His wife was chosen for him. The wife was chosen for him by Raymond. Raymond is interfering with her potential pregnancy, which is such a haunting and fucked up idea. Earlier in the movie, Jesse Plemons, the worker's character, says, yeah, me and my wife are struggling to have kids, an issue with her ovaries, which I did find rather humorous and also really strange. It's a really weird way to put it, and you can tell he's bullshitting from the jump. But what initially in that scene feels like maybe he's just saying this out of politeness because he doesn't want to go in depth with why they can't have kids, you find out is actually a flat out lie, and he's been helping Willem Dafoe disrupt Hong Chow's pregnancies. And I really just want to dig into this because it's the most fascinating part of the movie for me, and I think they abandon it a bit too early. This is the part of that first film that left so many questions to me. What does Willem Dafoe's character Raymond get out of setting up Jesse Plemons with a wife, with a house, with this whole incredible existence? Is it just this perverse thing of he loves giving Jesse Plemons the illusion of a good life? He loves giving Jesse Plemons the illusion that he has a life outside of work, but really when he gets back into work, he is Raymond's bitch? And it has your head spinning in circles. Maybe you can say that Raymond is disrupting the pregnancy of Hong Chow's character because he doesn't doesn't want Jesse Plemons to ever be properly tied down to a wife and properly committed to anyone else but him. You know, if that's the case, why did Raymond ever set up Jesse Plemons with a wife in the first place? It is very clear that Jesse Plemons basically exists just to do whatever Raymond wants. And I find that really interesting too. The idea that Jesse Plemons might not even care about having a wife, might not even care about a house, but he wants it because it's what Raymond wants for him. Just so interesting. And I just wish this idea with the wife was just a bit more explored, because I think I struggle to have empathy for Jesse Plemons' situation, because I'm like, well, Jesse Plemons has been just as cruel, if not more cruel, to his wife as what Raymond has been to him. So I don't really see him as a victim. So instead, I just engage with all the people in this part of the film as people that are trying to escape the boredom of life. You know, people that are just desperate to be agents of chaos. Like, look at RMF, for example. He is the linking tissue between all three. And I'm pretty sure the movie is implying that RMF is a previous, like, Jesse Plemons for Willem Dafoe. He also has been working for Willem Dafoe, and he's reached his expiration date, and he's reached the natural conclusion that Jesse Plemons will probably reach, which is basically Willem Dafoe saying, will you die for me? Are you ready to be killed for me? I think it's a really interesting read, the idea that Jesse Plemons does eventually kill RMF, and I think Jesse Plemons will eventually be in RMF's spot. I think eventually Willem Dafoe will be asking a new worker of his to kill off Jesse Plemons' character. I think it's infinitely fascinating. I also think that the ending of this actually links to the third story more than people actually think. I've seen a lot of people say that all three stories aren't that connected, but I actually think the ending of the third story puts Jesse Plemons' character in peril again and means his story isn't fully resolved here, but I'll get to that when I talk about the third story's ending. Next, let's talk about Section 2. I absolutely love Section 2. RMF is Flying, I think, is a masterpiece. I would have watched this for 3 hours. I love this concept. I think it's so fascinating. Again, this is the doppelganger one where his wife gets back and he's like, I don't think that's really my wife. And I think the ending of this story can go one of two ways. One is incredibly tragic, incredibly haunting, and incredibly dark. And the other interpretation I have is surprisingly gorgeous for how horrifying the rest of the movie is. First off, this has the biggest laughs of the film for me. I absolutely love the hard cut of the sex tape. Yes, we could kind of tell based on how that scene was set up that what he was talking about when he was talking about the fond memories of his missing wife was going to be like a sex video, but I did not expect it to be couple swapping between the three people at the table, and I absolutely love all the facial expressions as they're watching this. No one's enjoying it. It's so strange. It is pitch perfect Yorgos Lanthimos sex humor. From there, I think the movie's story is just incredibly fascinating. I love following the story of Jesse Plemons' character basically trying to figure out whether his wife Liz is who she says she is or whether she's a doppelganger. Now, there are a few things that are basically physically confirming this theory. First off, he has a set of dog tags, and when Liz is returned, she also has a set of dog tags on her, and he is visibly confused. He's like, why would she have a pair of dog tags if I have her pair of dog tags? What is going on? On top of that, throughout it, he is getting phone calls from what sounds like Liz from like the other side. It sounds like this garbled language that is being disrupted and interrupted. Yes, it is a very valid interpretation that he is just going nuts. He is medicated. He shows psychotic behavior throughout this section, but I also feel at certain points his theory is validated. There's this really interesting scene where Emma Stone's shoes are too small for her. Like, they're not even close to fitting comfortably, and Jesse Plemons is naturally very confused by this, especially given the fact that if anything, she should have lost weight and got a bit smaller, not bigger. I think the really telling moment in this section is we see something that Jesse Plemons doesn't. We see her actively trying to hide the fact that she can't fit into her shoes. And I think this is actually really, really important. Really important. Now, yes, you can make the argument that the reason she's scared is because he's already been unfair with these delusions and she doesn't want another one to like set him off. But I actually read it a different way. I really read it as suspicious. Now, maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm getting as delusional as Jesse Plemons' character is. Maybe that's what the movie's going for. But when she kind of like looked over her shoulder to make sure he didn't see the fact that her shoes didn't fit, it felt like she knew this moment was coming. It genuinely felt like, yeah, she was a doppelganger and she knew that some things would be off. And she knew that, oh shit, the shoes don't fit. This is going to give me away. And yes, I know that sounds crazy, but given where the story goes and a few more things that come up, I think this theory is actually quite substantiated and validated. Some more evidence for the idea that she is actually a doppelganger. She gets pregnant, and it is clearly heavily implied that Jesse Plemons and her have not had sex since she got back. We see him refuse her at multiple points, and Emma Stone verbally says out loud, "Oh, I know, it's impossible. The doctors can't believe it. They say it might be a psychological pregnancy," which, like, we are meant to laugh at the absurdity of that situation. It does feel like the movie is saying to me she's having immaculate conception. Now, yes, maybe you can make the argument that Jesse Plemons was lying about whether he actually fucked her or not after being hit with the baton, and I think that's a really interesting conclusion you can make.
She asked me to fuck her. We didn't, obviously, fuck.
It does feel like he's been a bit cagey when he's talking to his friend about whether he did have sex with her or not. However, Emma Stone's character Liz, the one claiming to be pregnant, flat out says, "I know it should be impossible. I can't believe it either." So I really did take that as they haven't had sex, yet somehow she has a baby, which is clearly weird doppelganger supernatural behavior. Like, it is uncanny and strange. But next we get into the back end of the movie, and I absolutely love this section. So basically Jesse Plemons kind of like starts starving himself, right? Because he refuses to eat, because he's like, "You're not my wife. I don't believe it. I'm not going to eat. I'm going to starve myself until the real Liz returns because I don't trust you." And it's like this massive shit test on Jesse Plemons' part. Now, at this point in the movie, if Jesse Plemons is wrong, right? If Liz isn't a doppelganger and all these things can be explained that she's just a bit of a different person after being lost in the island, he's an asshole. He's a monster. He's been manipulative and cruel and showing no empathy and understanding to his wife. Clearly an allegory for the fact that, like, we expect so much from our partners, and when they don't meet the expectations we have of them in our heads, we manipulate them and we are cruel to them. And it's looking at abusive relationships. This whole story works as an incredible analogy for manipulation, for abusive, controlling relationships. It really does. However, I actually love the fact that they commit to a potentially supernatural occurrence in this section of the movie. So here's the thing I love about this section, right? If there is something supernatural going on, if Jesse Plemons is right and Liz is actually a doppelganger, and he is getting the doppelganger to basically herself and self-destruct because he knows his wife to the bone, and all these minor changes are enough proof for him that his wife is actually out there and this woman isn't who she says she is, it's almost a beautiful ending. It's like you instinctively know who someone is in your core. You know the person that you're in love with so much that these minor things are enough to throw you off the scent. However, if you have the read that this is all in Jesse Plemons' head, this is a tragic, disturbing commentary on expectations of your partner. Because basically Liz starts feeding parts of herself. She gives him her finger, she gives him her liver because it's the only thing he says he'll eat, and she herself trying to be the version of Liz that she thinks he wants. And on his end, he's trying to shit test her and just check whether she'll do it to see if she's a doppelganger or not. It's completely fucked up. And if you have the read that it's all in Jesse Plemons' head, it's a really tragic look at the fact that sometimes you can never be the person that someone has in their head, right? And the ending of this story is incredible, right? Because basically Jesse Plemons shit tests her to basically see whether she's a doppelganger, whether she's an alien, whatever you want to say it is, and says, "Hey, you know what I really feel like to eat? You know what would get me off this hunger strike? If you gave me your finger." She cuts off her finger. He doesn't even eat it. Then he says, "You know what I really want? Your lung." And she proceeds to cut out her lung, die. Now, the movie could have ended here and I would have been like, holy shit. And I just would have had the interpretation that Jesse Plemons did go nuts. And again, my interpretation of the movie is it's trying to talk about the fact that sometimes you can never live up to someone's unrealistic expectations. However, then someone knocks at the door and it's like a happy-go-lucky, awesome version of Liz, and they embrace. Now, yes, I do think the read that this is all in his head and he's having a delusional fantasy because he can't live with the guilt of what he's got his actual wife to do and the fact that he couldn't trust that his wife really was his wife, so he imagines that a new version of his wife has shown up. I get it. I get that interpretation. I think it's completely valid. But I fucking love the idea that this is actually happening. And the reason I think it might actually be happening is in all three sections, there are supernatural elements. RMF shows up in all three sections. And in the next section we're going to talk about, there are genuinely supernatural plot points that the movie focuses on and shows are tangible. On top of that, the movie makes it clear whenever things are dream sequences or flashbacks. Whenever we have flashbacks in the first section, it is in black and white. And anything that is real and that is currently going on is in color. In this section, we see a dream sequence about dogs basically being humans, and that is in black and white. We also see flashbacks, again, that are in black and white. So I think it's actually important to note that when he sees the true version of Liz, it is in color. It is presented in the same reality. And again, the third section and all three stories are in the same universe, has genuine bona fide supernatural elements that are a core part of the plot. So I don't think it's actually a stupid read to think that the point of this movie was deep down, despite all the fucked up things he got Liz to do, that Jesse Plemons was right. And I think it's a really gorgeous read if that is the end of the movie. The fact that he was hearing these phone calls and he was like, no, I know my wife's there. Like, I know you aren't her. I know my wife well enough to know what I need to do. I need to get you out of my life and get the real Liz back. I think it's really sweet. Yes, and yes, I know it can't really be explained logically. Now, I do appreciate the read that the Liz at the end is just guilt. It is a figment of his imagination because he fucked up so badly and made his wife himself. Like, I get it. It's a great ending too. And again, what it has to say about codependency and what one person will do for the other is really fascinating. I just love the idea that it's a doppelganger. When she showed up, I audibly went, holy shit. Like, I found it disturbing and uncomfortable. And then when I thought about it some more, I actually kind of found it really beautiful. However, I'm not unreasonable. If we do want to substantiate the idea that this is an allegory for abusive relationships and Jesse Plemons is just a flat out piece of shit and should have listened to his wife, I think there's some really interesting angles. First off, there is a section where she punches herself in the stomach and punches herself in the face. However, this is off screen. And we know Yorgos Lanthimos is not afraid to show us fucked up stuff. There is literally a dog that gets brutally cut by someone in this movie. So Yorgos is not afraid to show demented stuff. We see her cut her thumb off. We see the aftermath of her cutting her liver out. I think it is important to know that they didn't show it because I think that scene following is completely interesting. Depending on your read on the movie, you either see her as an abuse victim talking to the doctors, being like, oh, you know, he just gets mad. He's been on the medication. It's really not his fault. You either see that as a display of genuine battered wife syndrome, and I think the scene really works that way, or you see the scene as a doppelganger trying to basically frame him and manipulate him and basically continue on her manipulation of Jesse Plemons' character. I also think if you watch this movie or if you rewatch this scene with the idea that this is like a replicant or a doppelganger or like an alien trying to understand human behavior, it's like this weird impersonation of what this thing imagines abuse victims to be like, because it is quite off and quite strange, and it can be read as she's just frazzled and frail being a victim of Jesse Plemons, but it's a really fascinating performance. On top of that, if you have it in mind that this first Liz that we meet is this weird doppelganger thing, the ending feels really fascinating too. She's left in this chair as punishment for failing to really understand how to replicate Liz, how to replicate human behavior and love. Another section that jumped out to me that substantiates the theory that it is actually all in his head is the fact that he starts moving his money around. That feels like an allegory for financial abuse. However, again, I do think the movie lays out plenty of physical evidence that she is actually a doppelganger. Again, the foot thing, yes, it can be explained, but I found the fact that she was being so suspicious and cagey about it really telling. On top of that, the dog tag scene, all the phone calls he's getting, the fact that his phone goes missing. We see him actively look for his phone, and I know he's losing the plot, but a lot of these things go unanswered and are left there to be intentionally vague, so the ending really hits you. And I do think Yorgos wants us to have a debate on what is real, what isn't, what we make of the ending, whether it is supernatural or whether Jesse Plemons is just an abusive, neurotic lunatic. I think that section could have been 3 hours of them just trying to figure each other out. You know, maybe this doppelganger trying to learn Jesse Plemons and what he wants, and him trying to like figure out how to outsmart her. I still think even if the runtime of that section was 2 or 3 hours, I think you can still pull off that kind of like vague, ambiguous ending. I absolutely love the ending. I absolutely love that section. Oh my God, I do not understand the people that said, oh, the first one is clearly the best. I feel like they're completely missing the point of part 2, in my opinion. Next, let's talk about part 3, because this is an absolute banger. So part 3, as I mentioned, yes, I can get into Jesse Plemons' character in part 3. I really don't think he's that important. I'm really sorry. In terms of like rundown and summary, Emma Stone is part of a cult where basically they are obsessed with the only water you can drink comes from like the cult, right? The cult leaders, played by Willem Dafoe and Hong Chow, basically like cry into water, and that is seen as purified water, and that is the only water that the cult members can drink. clearly a coercive control tactic, all right? That's how they get the cult in. They basically tell all the cult members, any water you drink outside of us is completely evil and will contaminate you, so you need to come to us to get your water, which obviously we all need water to live. So it's a pretty abusive thing to do. On top of that, the cult is a sex cult. So the only people that cult members can actually have sex with are the leaders played by Willem Dafoe and Hong Chow. That is the only people they can have sex with, because otherwise they are being contaminated by outside people with their like water and bodily fluids, right? Pretty fucked up. I think Emma Stone absolutely crushes this role. She is really cold and icy and kind of birdy throughout the opening section of this film. She's trying to find a messiah, a really important plot point that we will get into for the cult. And the way she kind of handles proceedings, she's very unapologetic. She's very rude to the people she's interviewing to be a messiah. She shows little to no regard for how rude she is to people around her. And then out of nowhere, the movie pulls off a really great emotional gut punch where we find out that she actually has a husband and a daughter who she visits. And I absolutely love the sections where she goes home to her daughter's house and checks in on the daughter from afar. She basically sneaks in when the daughter is at school and the husband is at work, basically blesses the house. She like drips uncontaminated cold water on the daughter's bed. And like, yes, is it fucked up that she left her family for a cult? Absolutely. But I think this shows that she still really cares about her daughter. And it's actually really tragic. Like, she's so brainwashed and so manipulated by this cult that to her, this is a really genuine and authentic expression of love. But obviously for any logical, sane person, you'd be like, Mom, I'll just drink normal water, you fucking freak. What are you doing? But it's so gorgeous and such a beautiful moment in an otherwise fucked up and really cruel, mean film. On top of that, I love the absolute gut punch that this film pulls off. So essentially, you have her dipping away from the sex cult to check in on her daughter and her husband, and eventually she gets caught by her daughter and her husband. I love how this happens too. She basically tries to run off and then just kind of like gives up because she's clearly caught. A great comedic moment. But then the husband's like, hey, like, your daughter misses you. And the daughter's like, please, Mom, come see us, come see us. And you can tell that the fact that the daughter is begging to see him really upsets her. Like, she goes, okay, fine. Like, I'll come to see you guys. And basically from there, in an incredibly awful section, the husband proceeds to drug her, roofie her, and then, you know. And in terms of the way I've seen this crime portrayed, this horrible act portrayed in film, I think this is one of the most effective, haunting, and got a very visceral reaction for me. I found this incredibly tragic. And yes, this type of act happening to a woman or man is never deserved. It's never that person's fault. I don't want to discount anyone's experiences. I am strictly talking about how it's portrayed on film, but I think this is just so effective because the way it's presented highlights how cruel, how cold, and just how like unfortunate it is. This doesn't make the mistake of being framed as something that could have been avoided or a mistake that she made. This is just a flat out awful thing that is done to her when she's just trying to reconnect with her daughter, and it puts her in such a sympathetic light and such a tragic thing to watch unfold. It feels inevitable as it's happening, but it's just so uncomfortable. On top of that, there is a scene after where she's like washing herself viscerally with soap, and I think this is obviously a great allegory for how people feel after going through these awful experiences. But on top of that, there's this added layer, this added like great metaphor about the contaminated water, his contaminated body fluids. And I think this is an incredible moment where all the ideas of this short film are just firing on all cylinders. It works as a great allegory for this type of abuse, but also a great flat out demonstration. It works on a metaphorical level or just a straight level. It's so well executed. It's such a great moment in the film because this is a scene we've seen play out countless times, the scene of someone washing their body after this crime is committed upon them. However, an important thing to note is she's now also scared not only of the awful thing that has happened to her and the physical and emotional side effects of that, but she is also and almost more terrified of whether the cult will find out that she is now contaminated. And she gets outside and the cult is already waiting there for her. It is a tragic moment, and they kick her out of the cult because they're like, hey, like, you had sex with someone else and you're now contaminated. And she obviously explains like, hey, like, that was done to me. It wasn't a mutual thing. Like, I was taken advantage of. And they basically go, yeah, sucks to be you. You're out of the cult. I'm going to come back to this later, but I really do think that this scene where she's trying to cleanse herself and get back to the standard that the cult wants her really does feel like a commentary on kind of like the obsession with purity and virginity that a lot of like Christian cultures have. And this idea of being a born again virgin, and somehow that makes you you better and more worthy of praise and more worthy of your spot in a certain religion or faith. I think that is a direct one-to-one allegory that this film is trying to explore. And then it has this really long shot, right, of her begging at the gates to be let back in to that cult. And genuinely, the movie could have ended there. The movie could have ended there, and I would have been absolutely floored by how good that third film was. Again, I thought that scene in the bathtub where she's cleaning herself was just the movie firing on all cylinders. But what do we get after that? We get Emma Stone going, you know what? Fine. I'm going to get them their Messiah and they'll have to let me back into the cult. So basically, I mentioned before, they set up the idea of a Messiah that can bring people back to life. And at first, when it's presented, you're like, okay, that's just an absurd concept. And obviously, this doesn't exist. And this is just a commentary on abuse of power and how shitty faith and religion really is. Because, of course, this isn't going to be real. And she starts trying to basically follow this recipe to make a Messiah. Long story short, it needs to be a twin, and one of the twins needs to be dead. There are a few other criteria that need to be selected, but that was the main one. And she meets a twin that believes in the vision, and she goes, I think I know your Messiah. It's my twin sister. And Emma Stone's like, yeah, but you're alive, so your sister can't be the Messiah. And she goes, no, my sister, like, she can heal people. There's like little signs. I think it might actually work. You know, I think she is the Messiah. And Emma Stone goes, no, but like one of you would need to be dead. You would need to be dead in order to be the Messiah. And then that sister proceeds to jump headfirst into an empty pool and kill herself. Anyway, so from there, Emma Stone proceeds to get like a stray dog and injures the stray dog and then takes it to the vet and sees the vet actually like heals, like miraculously heals the stray dog's injury, like way faster than medicine ever could, and drags her over to a morgue to get a dead body and bring them back to life. And who's the body? It's the body of RMF. It is the body of the man that Raymond in the first story asked Jesse Plemons' character to kill. Jesse Plemons' character went through that, killed the man. He is now back here and he is potentially going to be brought back to life. And I was sitting there like, okay, obviously it's not going to work and she's going to stay out of the cult. End of movie. It fucking works. It works. And it's such a great moment because at that point you are sitting there in the back of your head being like, please work. Please, movie, like go there, go there. And this is the supernatural element I was talking about that I think substantiates the idea that the second film might also be substantiated in its supernatural material. But yep, this person is brought back to life. RMF is brought back to life. Now, I did mention earlier in my first section film that I think the ending of the third one actually informs it. RMF is now alive. Again, Jesse Plemons failed to kill him a few times, and Willem Dafoe got so pissed that he kicked him out of his little abuse cycle. And now RMF is alive, and I feel like Willem Dafoe will eventually find that out and kick Jesse Plemons out again. So again, I love the idea that all these films are about cycles of abuse, and in one way or another, these cycles are going to continue. Maybe at the end of Jesse Plemons' film, the cycle continues and he still doesn't believe Liz is Liz, or Liz is normal, but Jesse Plemons has got so fucked up by his experience that she doesn't see Jesse Plemons as the real Jesse Plemons, and that cycle starts, but she's the antagonist and he's the victim. Incredibly fascinating. So I love the cyclical nature of these movies, but regardless, RMF is now alive. And then we get the great dance sequence that we saw in the trailer. And I just have to vent. I absolutely loved the trailers for this movie. The Sweet Dreams trailer that we got, incredible. I used edits of that in my challenges video, like just an unbelievable trailer. But also the brand new Bitch trailer we got to this like techno music was just so awesome. And I loved Emma Stone's dance in that. I'd seen it so many times. I loved the way it hit on beat. It was so good. So when they actually finally went to show that dance scene, I was like, oh great, it wasn't just for the trailer. And then it's like, worst takes of the dance. I don't know why they did this. Why did they not just use the dance from the trailer? She didn't do all the great moves. It felt like outtakes, just so strange. Like, I don't get it. Like, I really love the version that was in the trailers. And as much as I love the version in the movies, it's just not as good. I know that's like a really dumb, stupid complaint. But regardless, RMF is alive. So now she does her little boogie. She gets in the car and she's like hurtling in her car to get to the cult to basically be like, let me back in, right? Now, it has been established that she drives very recklessly, but also she's really good at driving. Like, she drives like Fast and the Furious, but she always parks in an incredible way. She never has collisions. She's like speeding down the highway with this new Messiah. The Messiah starts to wake up because the Messiah was a bit drugged, right? Emma Stone looks over and goes, "Oh my God, like, you're awake. We're just going to the cult." Uh-oh, car crash. She crashes her car and the Messiah is dead. It's a great ending punchline. Like, Emma Stone went to all that effort, created a Messiah. Someone had to die to create this Messiah, and now she's accidentally killed the Messiah on the way to the cult. However, I actually think it's a deceptively powerful and deep ending. First off, the cult does not deserve their Messiah. The cult blamed Emma Stone's character Emily for the assault she went through. They kicked her out. It's also inferred that the leader of the cult, Hong Chau, doesn't really like Emily, Emma Stone's character, because Emma Stone's character consistently sleeps with the other leader of the cult. And there's a clear jealousy angle there. So them kicking her out is cruel and mean, and they don't deserve their Messiah. Like, they don't deserve it. It's a great ending in that sense because Emma Stone's character never gets to reward them. I also like that Emma Stone is still alive and just the Messiah is dead, because it leaves a few interesting ideas going. First off, Emma Stone knows like the recipe. She knows the formula on how to make another Messiah. So if she wants to, she can try for a few years, find a bunch of twins, and this is Yorgos Lanthimos' absurd world, so I'm sure in his sort of universe, she'll be able to find another pair of twins where one of them just like necks themselves for her or something, so the new Messiah is actually created. However, the interpretation I like better is that this is a blessing in disguise. This is basically like a second chance at life. Something has intervened and caused this car crash that basically stops Emma Stone going back to the cult, and hopefully it's almost like this second chance. It's like this get out while you can and live a normal existence. Before I wrap up in this section of the film, I do just want to circle back to the ex-husband because I find it really interesting. Now, first, you do have pity for the ex-husband and for the daughter, right? You know, oh my God, how could she leave such a sweet, caring family to go be with this insane sex cult? However, the fact that the first chance he gets, he abuses her in that way tells me a few things. First off, probably not the first time. And if it's not the first time, if this is the type of person she has always lived with, and he almost definitely is, right? Because you don't just like turn into that randomly one night. He knew what he was going to do. He had a plan. He had the roofies. Like, he knew what he was doing. You know, that was calculated like he had done it before. So if that is something that had been present in their marriage before, I get why she would have got wrapped up into a cult. It's like Midsommar, right? Like, cults will take advantage of people that are vulnerable, people that are grieving, people that are victims, and be like, we can give you a better life. And I think it's just a tragic story of someone who got swept up because they saw the cult as better for them, and either end is an awful option. Emma Stone really is in between a rock and a hard place. It's like, do you go back to your old life where this abusive partner will probably abuse you again, or do you go back to this cult that didn't really take care of you when you were abused, even though they promised you a better life? Also, one thing I find completely fascinating as I think about this movie more is the idea that, did the husband know that by doing what he did, he was contaminating her with his bodily fluids in the eyes of the cult? Was this a sort of control power thing to get her back in his life because she gets kicked out of the cult? Or is it just a random consequence of a hateful thing that he did? I'm really curious to see what you guys think, and whether you think that it's kind of like this war between the cult and this awful ex-husband to see who controls Emily more. It's such a great movie. And I'm genuinely really wondering how so many people, how the apparent unanimous decision is that one is clearly the highlight and the other two are just okay. Like, I understand if some people like, yeah, number one was my favorite, but like, everyone is saying number one is their favorite. And I feel like I'm living in a cuckoo clock because I got so much out of these other two. Again, with the first one, I think the big things I'm really like wrapping my head around is the Hong Chau, Jesse Plemons, Raymond like trifecta. But I think that movie isn't that interested in exploring it. And that's why I think the abortion and the miscarriage thing in the first section really could have been explored more. However, I haven't had this much to talk about with a movie for so long. Currently, this movie is my third favorite next to Challenges and Dune Part 2, but I do need to rewatch it. There are a few theories that I still need to finalize, and I really am dying to just get a second opinion and really unpack a few of these stories. I think it's been the unanimous opinion of the people I've seen it with, like, yeah, we need to watch that again. So if I watch it again and it's my favorite movie of the year, I will let you guys know. The last thing I want to talk about is I do actually think these movies are connected. Yes, RMF is brought back to life, and I do think that the order of stories is number 2, given the fact that RMF is alive, then number 1, given the fact that Willem Dafoe is trying to kill RMF, and then number 3, because RMF is brought back to life after being run over. However, it could go the other way. Maybe in number 2, RMF is alive, and then in between number 2 and 3, RMF dies at some point, is brought back to life, and then in the first section, Willem Dafoe wants to kill RMF off because he wants to sustain a natural order of things. Either one is incredibly fascinating. The reason I think that second theory might be valid is because at the ending section, RMF is eating a sandwich, and it shows that he's in the outfit that is present in the first section, that RMF embroidery is on his shirt. So I think it might actually be suggesting that number 3 takes place before number 1. I think either way, there's a bunch of interesting ideas. Again, there's one interpretation where it means Jesse Plemons didn't actually get the job because RMF has been brought back to life. But if you take it the other way, it almost feels like Raymond from the first film is this like overseer, this like omnipotent being that is like, hey, something's out of order here. Someone has come back to life who shouldn't, and you need to go kill them. They'll be in this RMF embroidered shirt. It's great. I love this movie. It's full of weird ideas. As I've been talking about, I'm like, fuck, that was a good movie. I can't wait to rewatch it. There's just so much interesting stuff in this movie. I think it is getting unfairly panned. I think it's really weird the takeaways people are having from this movie. And no, I do not think Yorgos Lanthimos has missed. In fact, I think a lot of these films represent Yorgos Lanthimos at his best. All right, I absolutely adored Poor Things, but I also loved the coldness and the bluntness that were in The Lobster and that were in Killing of a Sacred Deer, and they are back here. And if you guys love Dogtooth, by the way, that weird Yorgos Lanthimos Greek European like masterpiece that he burst out onto the scene with, you guys will probably love this movie. I absolutely adored it. Look, I hope this has added some substance for those who saw the movie and were like, what on earth did I just watch? If you disagree, please be friendly, but please let me know. I'd love to unpack this movie. I think because I saw it early, the discourse is really quiet at the moment. I can't find too many people really getting in depth about this movie. The Reddit is basically dead, and I've really been looking to see theories and see what people think of these movies. So basically, I want this video to start the conversation. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It helps me out massively. Please let me know what you'd like me to talk about. I am actually open to suggestions, and I'm actually thinking of starting a members only or Patreon podcast where I go through a bunch of people's suggestions, and it gives me a chance to get through content quicker that isn't these like structured, edited, well done videos. So please let me know if the Patreon idea is interested. Please let me know if you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you'd like me to talk about next. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely day.